Hi, John.
Hey, Tim, how are you?
I'm doing good. I'm doing good. You know, we did a workshop today up in Bellevue at a wonderful place. And one of the questions that was asked I thought was really interesting, and I think that we have something to say about it.
Indeed.
And that is if we have ideas or principles about duo playing, two guitars, that we could share that might be helpful because, as you know, and we do it too, guitar often gets played two guitars because we have guitar friends, probably more than two harmonicas or two saxophone players.
Maybe the only instrument where we really do play often in duo.
Yeah, it could be. Yeah. And so I think there are some important things to consider when we're playing in a duo.
Agreed.
And I'd like maybe to just offer to see what comes to mind off the top.
All right. Well, I think part of it is leaving space for each other, as you know, and we both value the use of space. And you'd think in a duo setting without a rhythm section, we need to really state the time in a very clear, obvious way. And that's one option. And you're a great rhythm guitar player. Your group and your work with Pearl Django and other groups. So you really have the quarter note pulse very beautifully, clearly defined. I do it all with pick and finger, so I don't use the pick at all in that way. However, I still try to keep a kind of a clear pulse if I'm playing quarter notes. Different sound, but hopefully the rhythms are accurate enough. But we can also imply the time with intention. So it does not always have to be stated. I heard Howard Oldham say that once at a workshop, and that resonated with me. So say we're playing a blues, and we just want to go. We can certainly do it that way, but we can also go. Okay, could you all feel that? Tim could. So we got that. I mean, Tim can comment this way too, obviously. We got this from listening more to piano players, I'd say, than guitar players. Can we borrow some techniques from a piano in terms of rhythmic intention, rhythmic figures when we accompany? Absolutely.
Yeah, I remember doing a workshop with Frank Vignola and Cheryl Bailey. And Frank said something similar to what maybe Howard said, is he said, you know, the time is always going. Yeah.
Yep.
Right?
We'd like it to be
it's
or not.
always there, right? So yeah, I agree. And sometimes, and I love the feeling of a good groove. I could listen to Freddie Green just by himself. You know, there's something really wonderful about that. But I also am a fan of Bill Evans and that sort of that forward rolling pulse rather than a implicit thing. So
I agree.
I'm with you. And I think probably the most important thing, and this changes from encounter to encounter, maybe even with the same people.
Indeed.
But that we agree somehow on how we're feeling it. You know, particularly the quarter note. I think the quarter note is an underrated entity in jazz.
I agree.
We can get quite involved in wanting our eighth notes to feel a certain way. And I contend that if your quarter note doesn't feel good, nothing will feel good after that.
I think you and I both like to walk bass lines. You do it really well with chords, and you and I both are a little on top, especially in this setting without the rhythm section. So sometimes it's just a little pop with the pick, or in your case it's with your thumb. But if I'm going, let me hear your bass line. One, two, three. So you and I feel kind of the same.
Yeah.
Now,
There's that kind of internal something.
Exactly.
Some kind of tick-a-ting.
It's a little anticipation. It's like a ride cymbal or the bass popping.
Yeah.
It's kind of a little, I guess if you had to notate it, it might even be a 30-second note in front of the downbeat.
That thing, yeah. But not pushing the downbeat, but hitting that anticipation.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And then I think that moves the time forward in a nice way.
You know, it's funny because I noticed that some bass players don't do that at all.
I know.
And especially bass players who are used to playing with drummers all the time, because that's the drummer's job.
Yeah.
And then when I play sometimes a bass and guitar duo, and the bass player is used to playing with drums, they may not do that, and I kind of miss it.
Yeah, I do too.
Right? But then I play with somebody who does that, and it's like, oh.
Then we can kind of relax because the time is flowing. It has momentum. Right. And this is really personal. I mean, there's some great bass players who play right in the middle of the quarter note, like a Ray Brown, for example, who was also great. He didn't drag, but I wouldn't say he was on top. But someone like a Dave Holland or a Scott LaFaro or an Eddie Gomez, not better than Ray Brown, certainly, but a slightly different approach to the quarter note.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
And like I said, I think it's if we agree on it.
That's right.
And apparently you and I do.
We do. I mean, you could tell when we were both kind of playing the bass line at the same time there for a beat or two that little popping anticipation was there.
And we have to watch out not to do too much of that. I'm guilty of maybe occasionally getting involved in the physical feeling of it and maybe not backing off of it.
Yeah, I hear you.
When necessary.
But it never feels, when we're playing together, it never feels rushed to me. So.
Now, what do you feel about range? Well, let's address
in terms
that.
of
high and low.
Okay, well, you and I talked about this at the workshop and also our concert with Jamie Findley, which is that we shouldn't be doing the same thing at the same time for more than a beat or two. So, and I tend to play more, as Jamie was saying in our workshop, tend to play more on the middle and lower.
Yeah,
I
you get such a beautiful tenor saxophone
kind of like
quality
it
down here.
But you and Jamie both have these beautiful singing chords way up here, and I don't venture up here too often. I wouldn't mind doing a little more of that because I could do some more homework up here.
Yeah.
So if I'm down here, then obviously you're going to be focusing on maybe the middle to the upper range. And if I hear you go down, then I'll try to venture up here a little. But the idea is just not to be in the same register for too long. That's all.
Yeah, and I think that it's not a crime to be down in a similar range. I think that we can get a little, sometimes it might be worrisome. We get worried that we're, breaking a rule, that this rule of never play the melody when you're accompanying a singer. But people get really hung up on that rule, but it's much more fluid than an absolute.
I agree.
And same with the range. I mean, I think that if we did a blues, let's play that blues, and let's both stay up here and see what we can do.
1, 2, 1. Kind of works. Yeah. Without the cutaway and these strings in your guitar,
there's a limitation.
Yeah. However,
but I think that
that can work.
It can work, and it's kind of like to me, it's almost feels like if a piano player is playing solo and they let the rule of this guy plays low and this guy plays high, and they kind of get up underneath themselves a little bit, and you can get tighter intervals, thirds, and things like that that can be very valuable and wonderful sounding if both people are listening.
I agree.
And paying attention.
And also, if we get really lucky, sometimes we'll arrive at a chord that complements, the two chords complement each other to the point that it sounds like a beautiful 12-string guitar chord.
Right.
That can work. That can work.
Yeah. The joy of the accident.
Sometimes. We get lucky occasionally.
Right. Okay, so we talked about the time feel. We talked about range considerations.
And
Anything
space.
else?
And space.
Space.
I would think also, and I think you and I value this, even in this setting, that we have some dynamic range available to us. And you and I were certainly doing this at the concert with Jamie, too. So inviting the audience in by bringing the level down, I heard Jim Hall do this many times. Where he would play almost at a point of a whisper, even if it was a listening room, and you hear the audience just leaning in. And so I think we should certainly consider the importance of dynamics even in this setting, and I think you and I know that.
Let's talk about this space thing a little bit. Let's play this blues again.
Right.
And let's see how little we can play.
Okay, see what
and
happens.
just see if it's still cohesive and beautiful without filling it up.
Let's try.
Okay.
Count us in.
3, 1, 2, 3.
fact, actually, I saw Lage Lund and Gilad Hexman both do this, where practicing with a really, really slow click, and it might even be on 3, every other measure.
Yeah.
And they could play quarter notes or eighth notes and stay pretty well dialed in. I was impressed, actually. I'm not sure I could do it.
Oh, I don't think I
But
could.
just teaching yourself to internalize time with these long increments of space in between. But I'd say that held together pretty well.
Yeah, that was nice. That was nice.
Yeah, and space, as we're saying, is so important, maybe not quite to that extreme. But sometimes,
Over the
sometimes-
course of an evening.
yeah, why not? Why not start a little bit of soloing together with a concept like that? Just see how much space we can get away with and still make it feel like it's swinging and the rhythmic intention of the time are still there.
Now, one last thing, because I want to keep it within the time frame. You mentioned dynamics, and I think that's probably one of the most important and most obvious things that can go wrong in a duo is if one or the other of the guys, the participants, the players, isn't sensitive to the volume of the other.
I agree.
And or the group itself, the duo, doesn't play with a range of dynamics throughout the course of a tune or an evening or whatever it might be. With this guitar, I find that as we did sound check and stuff, this guitar was quite a bit louder than that one. Or it did, maybe not louder, but it projected to the microphone and with a little bit more high end. So I had to modify how I was touching it, even to the extent where I related to the microphone a little differently than you.
And I pulled
so
a little
that
closer.
You
yeah.
could get a beautiful sound without this one being ruined by being further away, but also not being too loud.
I agree.
And I think that is important whether you're playing, 2 Telecasters or two
or 2
old
Lerch shops.
Gibsons.
2 beautiful old Lerch shops, both of which you own.
Right.
I agree. Yeah, dynamics and kind of awareness of what, in this case, the other man is doing. In the case of a larger group, still finding your place in the dynamic scheme of things and paying attention to that, I agree, is critical in any setting, even playing alone. You and I both play alone sometimes.
That's right.
We can play softly alone.
Yes, yeah. Yeah, I actually prefer music that has a bit of a whisper rather than a shout.
Me too.
Although I think the shout can function as well. I think
agree.
there's room for that in the world.
I agree.
But I think personally I tend to be on
Yeah.
the quieter side.
It also allows for certain kinds of nuances with inner voice movement and open string voicings and things that are harder to do with obviously louder volumes. That finesse and that attention to detail is not possible.
Well, thank you, John.
Pleasure, Tim.
I look forward to talking more about this particular subject. There's a chance that we may do a longer course about this
I look forward
type
to that.
of thing, duet playing. But it's so beautiful, and it's so beautiful to hear you playing that guitar.
Thanks.
Look for on YouTube a recently posted duet of My Ideal, John and I playing these 2 instruments. And check out John's website.
Yeah, johnstowell.com, timlerch.com.
That's
We
right.
both have multiple things
Us
available on
.com.
TrueFire. We have all kinds of content available online, and we'd love to hear from you if you have any comments.
Yeah, very good. Thank
Pleasure,
you, John.
Tim.